Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Leo from Future Networks, and today we are joined by Robin Wingard, who is co-founder and CEO of Wingbits. Wingbits is a really awesome example of DePIN and a DePIN project in my eyes. We're going to get into that in a second, but before we do, Robin, thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. No, and we'll get into what Wingbits is today, how people can get involved. Before we do that, just for anybody listening who's never heard of Wingbits before, I would summarize it as follows. Like Wingbits it's a DePIN that is focused on tracking the movement of airplanes. So you get a device, you put it on your roof, it's tracking planes above your airspace. And I may have butchered that slightly. Robin, you can give a more comprehensive overview in a second, but before you do, I would actually just love to hear a little bit about your background and how it is that you got into Wingbits. You were a pro golfer before, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I was. So it's my background is a little bit, I guess odd in terms of most of the people in the crypto space. But so I started my career as moved to the US when I was 17, played college golf, UT Knoxville. And then I played professionally for 3.5 years. So I played the European Tour, European Challenge Tour, and a little bit on the smaller tours in the US. And I just got super sick of it. Was fortunate enough to be able to build something while I was still playing, and I thought it's way more fun building a business than playing golf. So I just quit halfway through the US Open qualifier, just walked off and said, I'm just going to work instead. And so kind of got on the entrepreneurial path right after. Worked for an investment company in the US, built 6 companies with them, mainly service industry, but one in the finance industry. And then I had 2 companies of my own, an online food delivery and an e-commerce company that I exited 2021. Moved back to Sweden, worked in the beverage industry. I was CEO for a company here in Sweden for a bit before joining Klarna, where I was up until I quit. There I was in charge of some commercial teams handling the portfolios. Klarna is a fintech company with large merchants. And quit that one because I was like, you know what, I just love building things. Joined an accelerator called Antler, and that's where I met Alex, my co-founder, who coincidentally was also at Klarna when I was there, but we didn't meet there. Mm-hmm. He's a technical background. I'm more commercial business background. And Alex had the idea for Wingbits. He got it from a podcast. And when he explained it to me, I just thought, it was really fascinating, really clicked well with Alex, and we decided to give it a go, and here we are.
That's so cool. And you got the idea from a podcast. Maybe someone listening to this today will get their own business idea. But yeah, super interesting. It's you obviously have a very entrepreneurial background, and the pro golfer thing is also really cool. And I think that's what complements you two as co-founders. You've obviously got you on the commercial side, and then your co-founder on the technical side. I think that sets you up really well. Yeah, I guess now is probably as good a time as ever. Maybe you could expand on what Wingbits actually is. What's the problem that you guys are solving?
Yeah, so if you look at aviation industry, it's obviously a big industry. It's $6 trillion, but out of that industry, this data market is $22 billion, and the data is called ADSB. It's regulated now in most countries. The biggest kind of like impact was when US regulated the data in 2020. So any plane flying through civilian airspace has to transmit this data twice a second. And, flight tracking is nothing new. There's massive networks out there that have been around for over a decade. And they rely on enthusiasts and volunteers, just mainly people that just love aviation. So they capture the data the same way we do now. You have your station, you have your antenna, and you capture this radio signal, it decodes, and you just aggregate it. And it gives you a really good overview of airspace. And there's a lot of use cases for this data. These companies make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but the people contributing the data don't really get anything in return. But the problem we saw is that, when you have a network that is solely relying on volunteers with a very, I'd say, suboptimal incentive model, you actually don't get a very optimized network. So, on average, each antenna is way less optimized in the traditional networks because there's a binary reward. If you send data, you get access to the platform. It doesn't matter if your antenna is in a basement or on the roof or if it's online at all times, you don't lose anything. So we wanted to find a model where a performance-based incentive model. So the better you are as a data provider, the more valuable data you contribute, the more you get in return. And it was just such a perfect use case for a blockchain. The DePIN model here makes total sense. What we do now is we aggregate the data, and then we can sell it in multiple formats, like either live stream, which is our first product. Then you can have the live stream in multiple states, kind of enriched with other data sets or deduplicated or completely raw or whatever. And then you can also sell it as historical data for other types of customers. But yeah, so it's our latency is way lower than the competition because it's a more optimized network. We can have a better spread. We don't have as much saturation, and the uptime gets way higher. And it allows us to, let's say we haven't done this yet, but it makes total sense if you have an area that you really need coverage at. Well, you can release bounty areas or regional rewards or some type of extra incentive to encourage deployment.
Yeah.
And it just gives a lot more power to the network and to the model, and you can have a better buyer experience because the customer can say, hey, please try to get coverage here. Okay, well, they're going to pay more for that coverage, so we can release more rewards in that area. So it just it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense as a DePIN model for all the reasons you just described. So, in a conventional sense, if I read that traditionally this type of industry relies on volunteers, right? And
yeah.
I think you gave the example I've heard before of the company. We'll get the name, was ADSB Exchange, who they were doing the same thing you guys do. They relied on volunteers. They got sold to a PE firm, and then basically when they gave nothing to the volunteers, 20% of the network just went offline overnight.
That's the originator to Wingbits, that the podcast talked about exactly that.
And that in itself, it's such a clear line towards DePIN, right? Everybody having shared ownership, the incentive model, it makes an absolute ton of sense. Taking it back one step further, just to the business model one more time. Why is it that these planes actually have to emit data? You said, is it once every 2 seconds? Why can't the plane track where they are themselves and somehow relay data back to, a cloud somewhere?
Yeah, so I mean, the plane will get the GPS location from space, and then it will essentially broadcast that out in every direction. So planes can kind of do plane-to-plane communication, but someone needs to capture it on the ground. And there's really no good model to do it. It makes a lot of sense to crowdsource it because, every airport that they have a radar, but, they only cover 30 minutes around the airport. So outside of that, they have no coverage. Yeah. And it's just not really feasible for a central agency or company to handle a global antenna network with maintenance and deploying them and all that stuff. So it just leans itself very, very well to crowdsourcing. And if you go on the FAA's website, they're actually moving over time to replace radar completely with ADSB because it's way more accurate. It gives you all the information. So it can really serve to make the industry a little more proactive. Instead of seeing a green blip on the radar, call out to see, hey, who are you? Mm-hmm. And it's way more accurate. So when you have a really good overview of airspace, aviation is becoming really congested. You can actually pack more airplanes into the space utilizing ADSB because you can have less kind of buffers around the flight path.
Okay. And I was thinking, so when I'm, on a long haul flight or whatever, I can log onto the plane's Wi-Fi network and use the internet. Is there a reason why ADSB is better than having onboard Wi-Fi that would then relay it instead?
Well, it's, you can actually track planes from satellites, but it's incredibly expensive. So you have space-based ADSB networks. The satellites are quite low orbit, so they burn up quite fast. So you can buy all this data from space. But, since they're up in space, they're really good at getting planes that are over oceans or high up. Mm-hmm. But down at an airport, for example, or really densely trafficked area, they're so far away, they don't really get good overview. So they actually have to complement their satellite data a lot of times with this terrestrial data. I mean, Wi-Fi, range is kind of an issue. But it's just, it serves itself very well with the radio signal because one antenna has about a 400 kilometer range.
Oh, wow.
But it's also with aviation, it's slow moving. ADSB has been around for decades and it's just now becoming regulated. Now they're working on ADSB version 3, which is going to include things like turbulence indicators and weather conditions and those sort of things. So they are working on it.
Yeah,
I'm sure in a far distant future there will be a different system, but for the next 10 years or so, ADSB is just became regulated. That's what they're moving towards.
And I think that you've just answered my original question very well. I think like what you're saying is actually it's nothing to do with Wi-Fi. It's just that ADSB is a better system than, for example, GPS. And to use, I don't know, Wi-Fi to relay the data, you're still relying on the GPS signal to find out where the plane is.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
But regarding GPS, I mean, it's quite interesting because if you go on like gpsjam.org to see where the GPS jamming is happening, it's actually the ADSB data you use to see where they're jamming the GPS. Because in the ADSB data, you have like a quality indicator, and that's kind of what you use to see like where is the jamming happening. So it's pretty cool data. It can be used for a lot of things.
Nice.
I mean, there's a ton of use cases.
That's a great segue into what was going to be my next question, which is, let's talk about customers. Who is it who's specifically going to pay for this data? What are the different types of data, this segment of customers?
Yeah, so it depends on the product, but pretty much anyone within aviation that does any type of analysis, like any type of travel analytics company, data analytics company, financial institutions can use this both for asset management, also, private jet movement, where they're flying. You have insurance companies can use the data to see if you deserve a refund on your ticket, because there's two data points. One is wheels off, one is wheels down. And that's kind of what you look at, if you were delayed or not. Logistics providers that use air freight, but maybe don't have their own planes, need to keep track of where the packages are. If you're airplane lessor, you lease planes, you need to see where are they, how far do they travel, in what areas do they travel, because there's different impact on maintenance and predictive maintenance, working on solving flight delays, so flight delay prediction. Flight delays cost the industry like $75 billion in 2022. So it's a pretty big issue. You can use the data. Well, no one has solved it yet, but why the demand is increasing is because, with the rise of AI and in better compute power, you can actually use the data for much more advanced use cases. So those are just a few. Some people need a live stream. A lot of people need historical data just to run analysis on it.
Amazing. So it really sounds like a massive market opportunity here as well. Like, have you got any idea, like if you to collate that all together, what the TAM might be?
Yes, it's $22 billion.
Okay, so pretty sizable. That's really cool. And I guess within that, there's different. Some customers might need to wait until you've got absolutely global coverage before they start using it. Other customers might be really interested in some data that you have that no one else does. Have you managed? I know that you're still in the beta phase. Have you managed to sell any of this data at all so far? So
we have pilots going, and that's validated our data very nicely. Because what's cool is that there's essentially a couple of different types of customers on the live stream, which we're doing now. So you have multi-source buyers, so they buy from many people, and you have single source buyers. So for the single source, we cannot sell yet. We don't have global coverage. But for the multi-source buyers, a lot of times what they can use the data for is essentially to fuse with their other data sets to essentially complement. So we've seen now in our data that compared to the competitors, obviously we're smaller overall, but there's specific areas of importance that we're way better. So by fusing the data sets, they get a more complete picture. So that's what we can do while we're growing, which is quite nice. After we're very close now. We have about 1,800 stations. I think it's 48 million square kilometers of coverage. So we're pretty much at the point where we can start releasing kind of historical data sets as well. But it's interesting. And also, there's so many use cases that are very specific. So what we're trying to focus on now is like what type of data and product serves the largest segment, because we can build many different ones. We just want to make sure we focus on the biggest ones first. Okay.
Amazing. Still in beta phase and already doing trials with customers. That's a really cool thing to hear. Congrats on that, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you said it yourself, right? This is a huge potential market. We've touched on this already, but if you would you be able to summarize why you think that Wingbits is better positioned than the Web2 incumbents to actually capitalize on that market size?
I think for a few reasons. I mean, if you look at the existing networks, I mean, they're good, don't get me wrong, but there's been very, very low innovation over the last decade, mainly because, all the two biggest ones have kind of just dominated, and everyone else has simply copied the same model. So there's no like innovation coming in. So the issues that are left with, like, they can't really target growth in specific areas. The latency get pretty bad because they have a lot of duplicate data because they have clusters of antennas. The uptime is quite low. But then, now we just announced, like, we are rolling out a different hardware strategy. So the first partnership is with GeoNet. They're going to be the first approved manufacturer. Is that there's no way for the existing network to secure the network. It's super easy to fake data, super easy to spoof data. You can push it from a server, and they have no way of controlling that. So we're solving that by introducing the cryptographic chip, making the device proprietary and custom to us. We're also introducing a very accurate GPS location in the device, so we can actually validate, hey, this device that the data is coming from is located exactly here, and that's really valuable.
Is that the GeoNet partnership for location verification, or is that?
No, so GeoNet creates, so we're doing two devices with them. One is a device just for Wingbits, and one is a dual miner with GeoNet. But, I really like GeoNet. One, they're an amazing project. They have an amazing team. And obviously, they have a ton of ARR, so they have a solid business. But we have really good synergies in terms of where the device needs to be located and what type of data we kind of collect. And obviously, they have a millimeter accuracy on the location of the device, which is super great for us. So it was just a perfect partnership. But having that accurate location, not every plane yet has ADS-B. And then the smaller planes send something called like Mode S. But to see those planes, you have to triangulate with at least a few antennas. But in the existing networks, self-reported location, so the calculations are way off. So we're essentially going to have a better model with a more optimized network combined with a really secure network with the hardware, which no one else has. So overall, it's going to be miles ahead of any other network.
It's amazing. It's such a cool example of a DePIN project partnering with another DePIN project to improve the service offering. That's awesome. I also I read that is it Alex, your co-founder actually came from WeatherXM. You could even consider incorporating.
No, he didn't. But Alex, he's been participating in a lot of the projects before, like Planet Watch, and he was early in Helium. He's really good in the space. But so I think he's actually been in WeatherXM as well. I know he has some stations. So he's been very involved. So that, since I have very, very limited Web3 knowledge, that's been very helpful having him. But what's good about Alex is that, he's like the technical co-founder, but he's also very business savvy. So it makes it really, it makes it way better in terms of, like, he's really good at determining what's the minimum requirements to get to launch something and what should we focus on from a business purpose. So the mix turns out really well as we're not completely split. We collaborate on a lot of things, not so much on the tech side because I can't really help too much there.
That's awesome. So collaborating on the DePIN side, you've got everything on the founder side. So maybe more a question for him then, but why is it that you guys chose Solana to build on?
So that probably is a more question for him, but Solana is a proven chain. The ecosystem is really large. And when we kind of decided, because there's a lot of cool chains out there that we looked at, but in the end, we chose Solana because we wanted to pick something that we felt like was solid, that we knew we could use. The documentation was really good, and that would be as low risk as possible for the community. So, but I'm sure Alex can deep dive way more into the details. But that's kind of like a broad overview.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to have him on a future episode. But low transaction costs and huge visibility, low latency. It makes a ton of sense that a lot of DePIN projects are choosing Solana. On the tokenomics front, or specifically for contributors, how is it the contributors are getting rewarded? How is that measured? What does that look like?
So essentially, we used a hexagon system that was developed by Uber. So we split the entire planet into hexagons, and each hexagon has a set amount of daily rewards per day. So if you host your station or antenna, depending on how good it is, you're going to cover multiple of these hexagons. So essentially, we just measure what's your percentage contribution in a specific area versus the other people covering the same area, and that's the percentage of rewards you get per day from that area. So it's really just like the most important thing when hosting now is having the location correct on the antenna, having it outside rather than inside if you can. We also, it's really good if you can get an antenna next to like an airport, because if you manage to capture the traffic that's on ground level rolling around on the tarmac, the likelihood of someone else capturing that is very small. So you're most likely going to get a lot higher contribution there. But it's a pretty simple formula. We wanted to keep it as simple as we could. We do have two types of rewards in the hexagon. One is just a base reward split by everybody, and then there's a bonus reward split by top 5 for each area.
Amazing, really cool. And for anybody who wants to get involved, I know it's the beta phase right now, which has kind of got limited spaces. Have you got any idea when your next hardware device will be released?
Yeah, so the first one with GeoNet will open for pre-order on October 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too far away. Regarding the current model, because we started, with a build your own model, so it's very heavily Raspberry Pi based. People reuse helium miners and that sort of thing. I think there's about 150 spots left because we're capping that at 2,000. And then, if you go on the build your own route and you join now, you have to add our security dongle, which you cannot purchase as part of the registration flow.
Yeah, I think something like $50 when it comes out.
Yes, $50. Yeah, it's $50.
Awesome. Cool. So getting towards the end of the podcast now, Robin. So just a couple more questions from me. In terms of what you guys have achieved so far, have there been any key milestones that have really stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think obviously getting the pilots going was really key, and getting the validation that, the data is really good. We know now we just need more coverage, but we know the data is great. That was a really big milestone. We've been expanding the team lately, so we've gotten some really, really skilled people on the team from, amazing backgrounds. So we have 2 more starting now, October, November. I think when we launched testnet was a pretty big milestone that we actually can distribute some tokens, which we did in May. Now we're really focused on getting to mainnet here before the end of the year. So besides obviously testnet, the biggest milestone so far was closing our seed round, which we did middle of June. We had amazing investors on board, so it was co-led by Borderless Capital and Tribe Capital, and then we had some amazing angels. Raised $3.5 million, so that's really going to allow us to kind of capitalize on this really good spot we're in and hopefully dominate the industry before too long.
Amazing. That's so cool. And I'm sure you will. I look forward to seeing that your progress as that unwinds. Robin, sorry, you mentioned there quickly, briefly, that you're building the team as well. How big is the team at present?
So we have right now 4 people in Stockholm, 2 more joining October, November. And then we have, I think, about 5 people remote. So we've added some people in, hardware, marketing, community management, and also business developer, which has been super helpful. So we're really focusing on building up our pipeline, and we are engaging with a lot of customers. So because we really need to gauge and collect information on what KPIs we need to reach for them to actually purchase the data in order to plan properly. So that's what we're doing quite a bit now.
Amazing. Really cool. I love that you're so focused on the customer side and on the revenue generation side as well. It's awesome to see.
I just think, from coming from a non-Web3 background, the technology is amazing. And I personally feel like maybe it's been abused a little bit. So the kind of overall view on Web3 is not super positive. And I really believe that the DePIN space is interesting because you can have a super solid business case, like a Web2 business case, combine it with the power of Web3, and it can make something pretty amazing. But we really need to create some long-term, sustainably successful companies to showcase that just because it's Web3, it doesn't mean it's going to be a rug pull. It's not a scam. You can actually build something solid, and that's really what I would love to do. Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense. And I think DePIN, it is that use case that is super tangible. You've got businesses with underlying fundamentals. So I think that's one of the things that makes DePIN such an awesome sector. And yes, I said love the focus from you guys on just building something that's useful for the customers that you've identified. That's great. So final question, Robin. I ask a lot of founders this and would love to hear from you. You touched upon it there. So you've obviously come from a Web2 background into Web3. Can you touch upon, maybe for any other DePIN founders listening, what are the main learning points for you for scaling a DePIN project and the differences between Web2 and Web3 for you so far?
I mean, the main learnings, or what I feel like at least scaling a DePIN, is that the community is the foundation of everything you're building. So you have to always be really careful and try to strike a nice balance between commercial value and like value to the community, because like if that scale tips too far in one way, I think it's going to fail, because you can't give everything to one side. So we try to really like always do right by the community. Like now when we changed the hardware model, we grandfathered everyone in. We're going to give them all free security dongles. Like, without community, we wouldn't be where we are. So I think that's what's really exciting about DePIN. You build it with community, but I think you have to do a really good job of caring for the community long term. Web3 is different, right? Because it feels like the rules are not really there. So it's quite exciting. It's a little bit like the Wild West. It doesn't work the same as a traditional business. People reach out with like wanting to, strike a partnership, and you don't know who they are. Like it's an anonymous, cat, NFT as a picture. So it's just a different space, but it's really exciting because it's kind of like, look, it's like really young still, it feels like, and it's not so stiff. People are excited. People are going to change the world. So I like that, but I do think over time we need to bring some more professionalism into Web3 and actually try to run it like a business and not just all hype and stuff. There needs to be something real done as well.
Amazing. So I guess just taking both aspects, the best bits from Web2, the best bits from Web3, combining them. Hopefully most of the people that you're going to be dealing with, partners and customers won't just be images of cats. They'll be doxed and you'll know who they are.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I could be completely wrong. Like maybe I come from a Web2 background and I expect it a certain way. Maybe that's not the best way, but that's just my personal feeling, I guess, or opinion.
I mean, there's a ton of room for experimentation within DePIN, within Web3 in general anyway. So, it sounds like you guys are on a really good path. Really, really excited to track your progress going forwards. Love to hear that you've also got a strong focus on the community as well. So, it's awesome to hear. And Robin, with that, thank you so much for shedding some more light on Wingbits for us. Thanks a lot for coming on. And I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.